In a world where too many metalcore bands go butt rock, one band continues to bring that old 2000s energy and age like a fine wine. Today we are ranking the albums of August Burns Red, and we're starting with Thrill Seeker in 2005. Alright, enough of that voice. So, this is the only album to feature original vocalist Josh McManus, and it is out through Solid State Records, which was a label they would stay with for the next 5 albums. And I remember this being pretty big at the time, and seeing this album cover all over the place, especially in like Hot Topic, and it came out in a pretty big year though for metalcore, alongside, get ready for this list: Avenged Sevenfold, City of Evil, Trivium's Ascendancy, As I Lay Dying's Shadows Are Security, Protest the Heroes' Kazaya, Every Time I Die's Gutter Phenomenon, Between the Buried and Me's Alaska, Darkest Hours, Undoing Ruin, Norma Jean's Oh God the Aftermath, and The Bleds Found in the Flood. That's a pretty big year and some steep competition, so within that context, I feel like out of all of those, despite being a good album, this is kind of my least favorite. Even so, it's very listenable with some real bangers, and the standout for me especially being Barbarian. So yeah, solid album, but they have so much better to offer, so this one is going to C tier. Then we have Messengers in 2007. This is the first album to feature now longtime vocalist Jake Lurs, and fully setting into their sound for one of their most highly regarded albums. Truth of a Liar has one of the best opening riffs of any metalcore album ever. It's just so triumphant sounding, and you could tell right from the beginning that this was a huge step up across the board from the debut. Plenty of great moments like Backburner, and just again to give you a little bit of a time capsule, the video for that premiered on MySpace Music. You've got The Blinding Light, The Balance, and Composure may be my personal favorite, with both amazingly infectious riffs and vocal hooks. Also, so much China Symbol. No doubt this album is a classic that I'd venture to guess like 90% of fans would rank it S, but there are even better ones to come, so personally I'm putting it at A tier. They followed that up with Constellations in 2009. So as great as Messengers is, everything that album did, this one does it even better, with more great riffs, tighter production, and even better songwriting. 30 and 7 and Existence are another great duo of tracks to open things up and set the slightly more melodic tone. Oceans of Apathy brings variations of riffs from Messengers, but also adds a cool little clean interlude to up the dynamics, as does the big pounding dramatic intro to Whitewashed and the twinkling tones of Meridian and Mariana's Trench, which was also featured on Rock Band 2. Indonesia is a major standout with guest vocals from Tommy Rogers of Between the Buried and Me, and the list goes on. The Escape Artist with another great vocal call out in that "Your mouth is like a grenade." Paradox, Rationalist, Meddler, really I'm just naming the entire track list at this point. Easily my favorite of their early era, but still it doesn't quite make the top because it just keeps getting better from here, so I'm putting that a little bit higher on A tier. Next up is Leveler in 2011. Now, for some reason, this is one I feel like is most commonly cited by fans as like the redheaded stepchild of the discography, and I'm not exactly sure why, again, because there's lots of great songs on this album that are among my favorites from the band. You've got Empire and Pangea, Cutting the Ties has another super triumphant build, and Salt and Light is just total melodic bliss. Something that would have been right at home on the next album, which we're about to get to, and may actually be one of my all-time favorite songs from the band. Then there's Carpe Diem and Internal Canon, both alluding to the more progressive ideas that would be further developed on Found in Faraway Places. Honestly, I only enjoy this one more with each listen, and it's still made number 11 on Billboard. I'm going to put this one at B, which honestly is only further grounds for me to say that if this is one of the lower ranked albums, August Burns Red may have one of the best metalcore discographies of all time. Then we got Rescue and Restore in 2013. This album became a fast favorite for me, and it's the one that got me back into the band after a pretty long time away. I'd also say that it's the most emotive album with a very melodic focus and lots of very genuinely heartstring pulling moments, thanks in part to some of their most anthemic and memorable vocals of all time. I also love the violin and acoustic elements that start to seep in, and it's just oozing with juicy earworm guitar hooks that never leave my brain on tracks like Count It All As Lost, Fault Line, Beauty and Tragedy, and the final half of Creative Captivity with that beautiful trumpet solo. Absolute perfection. If you don't get caught up in that, you have no heart at all. Then there's also some heavier moments like on Treatment and Animals, but even those evolve into more progressive and experimental elements. If I'm nitpicking, I do think that Beauty and Tragedy would have been a better way to kick things off with that killer starting riff, and Echoes feels like a better closer too with that warm bass rumble. Regardless, this one made number 9 on Billboard, and at the time, they considered it to be their most ambitious work to date, and it's that dedication to growing and expanding on their sound that I attribute to why I consider them to be one of the last great metalcore bands of this era. Putting this one at S tier, and it remains in my top 3. By the way, if you're enjoying the video, be sure to hit the like button. Comment below as we're going along too if you have different thoughts on any of these albums. But it's at this point the band made the jump to Fearless Records and dropped Found in Faraway Places in 2015. So speaking of growing and experimenting, I feel like they outdid themselves in every possible way with this album. The heavy parts are heavier, the proggy parts are proggier, and all that experimentation that we keep touching on really just comes together here for some seriously ambitious composition. Like, you've still got the heavy hitting but more straightforward stuff like The Wake, Everlasting Ending, Blackwood, and Ghost, which features Jeremy from A Day to Remember, and also especially Vanguard, which is an absolute scorcher. But then you've got the real highlight stuff like Identity and Martyr, which contrast wild picking patterns with haunting strings, and another all-time favorite of mine, Majoring in the Minors, transitioning into a full-on hoedown, complete with woodblock and country-style guitars. Separating the Seas transforms into like Fiddler on the Roof in the middle. Broken Promises gets super progressive over its impressive 6 minutes of ripping guitars and plotting bass lines. Tons of fantastic solos too. I really think that over time this has become my all-time favorite August Burns Red album. It just feels like it's the most interesting and multi-textured album that the band has ever done, and that's so rare and refreshing to see again when so many other metalcore bands just go butt rock this many albums in.
Never go for butt rock.
So for those reasons, it is going to the top of S tier. They followed that up with Phantom Anthem in 2017. Now, given that Found in Faraway Places set that bar so high, I felt like nothing could really hold up to that, but I think they did a really damn good job here of maintaining the same level of quality without retreading the same ground either. I'd say that this album is less experimental, but still very progressive with lots of longer songs, really focusing back in on the guitars, slaying away. Opening up strong with King of Sorrow, which even has some kind of Between the Buried and Me vibes towards the end. The Frost is just a sick single and sort of a blueprint for the perfect progressive metalcore track with all the great hooks and anthemic energy, super motivating lyrics too. Same goes for Invisible Enemy with that cool Eastern sounding intro and wicked tapping riff. Quake is super infectious, Float is pure emotional bliss with its earworm hook and awesome backing vocals. Dangerous brings back some of that additional flavor of the previous album with its interlude before shredding it up once again with another righteous tapping guitar solo, and Carbon Copy is a killer closer just brimming with melodic guitar work, and one last extremely satisfying explosion of catharsis. Really, there's not a single bad or even average song on this one, so this one is also going to S tier. And then we had Guardians in 2020. So then coming off of that trio of albums, this one had a lot to live up to the point that for the first time in their entire discography, I felt a little bit let down. But I love doing these tier lists because it gives me an excuse to go back and revisit things, and sometimes an album just hits totally different. The Narrative is a great opener, bringing the usual riffage, and Bones follows that up with some progressive influences and a great hook. Paramount has great use of delay effect and more fun gang vocals perfect for live performances. Dismembered Memory and Extinct by Instinct are super catchy. Bloodletter is a real chugger, and even though Defender is one of the first singles I wasn't a big fan of at the time, it certainly has its moments and a truly crushing breakdown, which hits so hard here since they use them sparingly. I still have mixed feelings about The Lighthouse, as I love the little sassy, squealy melodic riff that pops up just before the 2-minute mark, and the groovy bass interlude and spoken word portion right after that kind of feels like a callback to Rescue and Restore. But the second-rate Linkin Park sounding singing parts sort of ruin that one for me. So really, this is another really good album, but it also just feels like sort of a step back to the more straightforward Messengers to Leveler era stuff. But unfortunately without the nostalgia points or as many memorable vocal moments, I would say. So still really good. I enjoyed it a lot more this time, but I think it's going to end up at B tier, but I think it could rise up with time. And that brings us to Death Below in 2023. The band moving from their longtime home of Fearless Records to Sharptone for this one, and the singles got me pretty hyped up again, not only with the usual display of great musicianship, but also some really fantastic guest appearances from that classic era of metalcore. Spencer Chamberlain of Under Oath shows up on Reckoning, which is also the longest track on the album, bringing some great progressive twists and turns, as well as just some really amazing moments for both the guitars and vocals to shine and act as the perfect closer. And Jesse Leach of Killswitch Engage guests on Ancestry for just a straight banger of a track that feels right out of the mid-2000s. Jason Richardson, current guitarist for All That Remains and formerly of Born of Osiris and Chelsea Grin, and JT Carvey of Era also drop in for the Shredding Tightrope and the Abyss, respectively. But outside of that, the band does just fine on their own as always, with the slide guitar opening and spoken word of Premonition really setting the stage, building up to the also nearly 8-minute The Cleansing, which is another absolute triumph of all of the band's best qualities. Fool's Gold in the Bear Trap is a fantastically atmospheric track with strong Found in Faraway Places vibes, a comparison I'd honestly make regarding a lot of this album. Then there's straight ragers like Revival, Deadbolt, and the anthemic and appropriately titled single Backfire, with Jake spitting some seemingly rage-fueled flames. And the twinkling synths and clanking bass of interlude Savink perfectly set up the galloping Dark Divide, which also brings its own progressive surprises. Y'all, I don't know how they do it, but I think this may be yet another benchmark album for the band with every member in top form. Not a single dud here, and again, it feels like a return to what I loved about Found in Faraway Places, to the point that I could see it even replacing Rescue and Restore at S tier. But for now, it's still early, so I'm going to put it very firmly at the top of A tier and give it some time to simmer. Y'all check out this playlist for plenty more metalcore rankings, including Killswitch Engage, As They Lay Dying, Trivium, Under Oath, and much more. And again, let me know down in the comments, how would you rank these albums differently? Let's get a discussion going. But that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.